welcome everyone to Level Up Together, level 3 of season 1. We are going to have a schedule of just every month, one Level Up Together, January, February, March, and April. So I'll talk a little bit more about what's to come at the end. For today's session, we have 2 featured guests today. As usual, just Zoom etiquette. Make sure you keep on mute while our guests are talking and presenting. We'll have lots of room for Q&A at the end, which you can either put in the Q&A Zoom feature or unmute to ask your question. I still would like to have some mark of your question in Q&A just so I can sort of like forward it to the guests. So make sure you drop it in Q&A and not the chat. Well, we'll run about 40 minutes of kind of talking between, I'll just be asking some prepared questions to both Sarah and Lisa, and just kind of going back and forth like podcast style. So the conversation will be mostly between them, and feel free to go where the conversation takes you. I might have some follow-up questions depending on what is said. And so we'll do that about 40 minutes, and then we'll open it up to the floor for questions. Please bring your own questions to the table for this topic especially. I really think this is one where hearing from what Sarah and Lisa have to say on various questions that you all will know and have on your minds, but from my perspective, I have no idea, will be very beneficial to you. So without further ado, let me go ahead and read bios for both of our guests, starting with Sarah. Dr. Sarah Pozderac Chenevey is an independent scholar, editor, mezzo-soprano, and photographer. She works at Christ Presbyterian Church in Canton, Ohio as a music associate, managing editor, and general computer person. Her work on nostalgia and racism in the music of BioShock Infinite was part of the collection she co-edited, Nostalgia in Video Game Music, and her research on sexuality and vocality in Hades was published by the Journal of Sound and Music in Games. She serves on the board of the North American Conference on Video Game Music, focusing on technological logistics of hybrid accessibility. Next, we have Lisa. Lisa Scoggin completed her PhD in musicology at Boston University and received degrees from Oberlin College and the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Though her primary musicological interest is in music and animation, she also enjoys examining music in film, television, and video games. She has published and presented internationally on numerous aspects of these topics, including a monograph on the music and animated show Animaniacs, Pendragon 2016, and as co-editor with Dana Plank and contributor for the collection The Intersection of Animation, Video Games, and Music, Making Movement Sing, Routledge 2023. She is currently working on a textbook on the use of music in animation. So everyone here, let's give a warm welcome to Sarah and Lisa. Right,
I feel like I should applaud for Lisa because she's also wonderful.
There's lots of Zoom applause and claps in the chat. All right, so welcome Sarah and welcome Lisa to this conversation on alt academic and independent scholar pathways. So to start, let me ask the question, how would each of you define these terms that are in the title, alt academic and independent scholar? What do those mean in your experience, and what is the distinction between them if that distinction is important?
Lisa, do you want to go first, or do you want me to?
You can.
Okay. So I think there's some overlap in these terms in the way I conceptualize them. It's not one of those like Aristotelian, necessary and delineating definitions. But when I think of alt academic, I think of someone who is still operating at least somewhat within a university context. They may not be following the traditional career path. Their position may not be a tenure track job within a music department, for example, or it might be within another university function. But they're still, connected with the university, probably a primary one. So someone who is primarily working at one university or college, but not necessarily adjuncting it at several. For independent scholar, I think the biggest idea is like, do you have a university whose resources you can draw on? Do you have a university that financially supports you as you do your research? And so there could be some overlap depending on how you personally conceptualize this. You could be affiliated with a university and not have access to funding. You could be affiliated with a variety of universities and have access to some resources like databases, libraries, things like that, but not have access to everything. So I think there's a fair amount of overlap and ambiguity. You could be both an alt academic and an independent scholar, depending on exactly how your situation works. And because every situation is so different, um, every situation is so different, it's hard to come up with a single necessary and sufficient definition. I consider myself an independent scholar, mostly because I don't have any university funding. I don't have any university affiliation at this point. I really miss the library.
Yeah. So to piggyback off of what Sarah said, I agree with that. I would say, examples of what I would think of as an alt academic are people like music librarians. So that's a path that I've seen a lot of my friends take who've gone on to get masters or PhDs or what have you, and then switch over to music librarianship. So that would be an example of that. And again, somebody who is sorry, I'm getting weird texts showing up on my phone and I forgot to turn them off. So people who are working at like 5 different universities, that's as adjuncts, that's kind of one of those weird kind of, it depends on how you define yourself. But yeah, I would define myself as an independent scholar also because I don't have those resources. I'm doing everything really very much independently, as the title includes. So there is some overlap. You could call yourself an independent scholar even if you're working as, say, maybe you're working as in acoustics, so you're in the science department. You could call yourself an independent scholar. You are getting that funding, so I would, if you're going to split hairs, put it more in the alt academic area. But I think for a lot of people, those terms are interchangeable too.
All right, thank you very much. So now I think we'll have a bit more of a substantial question here for hearing from each of you. So could you tell us some about each of your scholarly journeys from the point of your education, what your goals were and experience in grad school, leading to where you are now? So leaving that open-ended so you can take it where you want to.
Well, I'm so used to telling this story. I will go ahead. Um, so let's see, my path in terms of going from university to where I am now. So my intentions when I first started, my master's is in tuba performance. So I was like, do I want to do tuba performance? Do I want to do more of the music history? Because I also love the music history. I did independent studies on Shostakovich and all that kind of stuff at the same time. And after a while, I realized that getting that DMA was not my path. So I switched over to the PhD. I did not really get much in the way of funding at all at my university. So I was working in retail and other those kinds of jobs at the same time that I was working on my dissertation. So do that, finish the dissertation, and then I finished it mid-year, was waiting for those magic calls to come in of course you're going to get this, please come and teach your tenure track. And because I was in Boston, and because in Boston there are more jobs in the biotech industry than there are people, I got a call from a recruiter saying, hey, would you be interested in coming to work for this local contract laboratory? And I said, sure, it'll help me pass the time. I got in, I got the job. They told me afterwards I got the job because I had a PhD. So it was very helpful for that. And then they started saying, oh, well, can you do this? Yes, I can. Can you do this? Yes, I can. And they kept asking me to do more and more different things, which led me into what they call quality assurance, which is basically making sure that everybody is following all the regulations you're supposed to, and that they're making the drug appropriately, and that the clinical trials all run the way they're supposed to. I got into that. And again, lots more jobs than there were people. And so that just kept growing and growing. And that's where I ended up. So really not at all where I expected to be. But that pays me well enough so that I can continue to do the research that I want to do and do, all the writing and go to conferences and all that kind of stuff. So I have a full-time 9 to 5 job working at a biotech in San Diego. And during my copious free time, I do all the writing and research and, the service and all the stuff that one might expect. I mean, I even run a learning management system for my biotech. So it's a lot of stuff that's very similar that I'm doing outside of the job. And my husband is very supportive. So that is how I ended up where I ended up. And then I think I will continue with other things in terms of how I got into the writing and other stuff with some of the other questions that you're going to ask.
Mine is not nearly as exciting as Lisa's. I've been in Ohio most of this time. So I started out as a piano and voice major in undergrad, and I didn't know what I really wanted to do. I wanted to learn about everything. And so we finally narrowed it down. I was like, well, I guess I'll go into mathematics if this gets too frustrating. And so my piano teacher was like, you can study music history, because I was like, oh, I love learning how and why things are. And he was like, you can do that, right? And I was like, what? So then I ended up at the University of Cincinnati, which was his alma mater, for my master's and my PhD. And in I think it was 2012, I was down at the mega, AMS, SMT, SEM. And that was when I discovered that Ludomusicology was a thing I could do. And so I was very fortunate. I had a very supportive advisor. I also have 2 kids. So my oldest, I was pregnant during my last semester of coursework and teaching. And I was working like 3-ish jobs, as you do. She was born a couple weeks early, 2 days before my comprehensive exams were scheduled. So I'm like, my advisor's texting me like, can we check and make sure everything's good for your orals? And I was like, actually, I'm in labor. Can we reschedule? We did. So I sat for my exams when she was 5 months old, which was exciting. And then we moved. My husband got a job. He's an engineer. He works in industry, and engineer is going to make more than a musicologist no matter what I'm doing. Let's be real here. So we moved up to Akron, and this is where I wrote my dissertation. I wrote half of it in a coffee shop across the street from my daughter's preschool, in like 2-hour chunks. Got the cheap cup of coffee. And it was one of those things where I had to really confront and be like, what do I want? Especially after I finished the PhD, after I defended in 2019. And it's like, I know I'm supposed to want to find a tenure track job. Like, that's what I'm supposed to do. That's what I learned how to do. But my family's stability doesn't seem like it's worth sacrificing for something that I just feel like I'm supposed to want. Like, I don't even know if I actually want that, but it feels like I'm supposed to want that. That's what I'm supposed to do. And so we spent a lot of time chewing on that. It was like, no, that's really not the right choice for our family. We could move all over the place and never get more than a year position, never do more than that. I was sick of jumping through hoops, and we wanted to have a second kid. So we now have 2 kids, and I found my way to my position through connecting with people. I knew someone who was making music up here, and she called me as a ringer to sing. And I sat next to an alto who was like, oh, I know this church that needs a musician. And I was like, oh, great. And so I sang there for a year. And then I got referred to a church that I've been now at, Christ Pres, that I've been at for 8.5 years. And I'm a newbie. We've got folks in the choir who have been there like 60 years. And then it just sort of grew from there. It was like, oh, we need somebody who can do all of these things, or any of these things. Because I was like, oh, well, I can do that. Oh, I can do all of this layout. Oh, I can fix that. I know how to work computers. And so now I joke that I have 3 jobs in a trench coat. Because what I have is I have my musician job that I get to make music, weekly, good, satisfying music. We sang the Duraflay Requiem last year. We are doing gospel mass. We just commissioned a setting of an evensong setting of like the canticles that will be premiering in May. And I get to do that and make music and get paid for it every week. And then I also get to do all the other stuff I like to do. I get to figure out audio systems and, updating websites isn't exciting, but I get to use all of those other skills and I get to do it in a way that works for our family. And then sometimes I have enough time that I get to write also. Biggest thing is childcare. So that's my roundabout story.
All right. Well, I think where Sarah's answer left off leads us really well into this next question, and here we can of course have like more back and forth and everything. So how do you see your educational background, your PhDs and your other grad school work and different degrees and fields? How did that educational background prepare you for the job and the roles that you have now? Those various hats that you wear, or the jobs that you have for your salary. What are those broadly applicable skills that grad school was able to equip you with?
Lisa, do you want to go or I'll go? I've got a thought. It's up to you.
Go ahead, and then I'll go after that.
Okay. So a couple different things. One is that the career path you see looking forward is often much more obscure than looking back. Hindsight is 2020. But when I think about all of the things that I experienced and learned and did, it makes total sense that I arrived here. But there would be no way of knowing that 10, 15 years ago, because this didn't necessarily exist. This job that I do did not necessarily exist. It didn't. And then probably the most useful things, and this is not just career-wise, but this is generally like living a good life-wise. I believe that the PhD should equip you to ask good questions. That's probably the most useful skill, is being able to ask good questions, know where there is something missing, because without a good question, you're not going to find a satisfying answer. You can ask all the questions you want, and you're not going to get a helpful thing if you're asking the wrong questions. Pattern recognition. To be able to observe patterns and see where something is missing and should be there, that is incredibly critical. To know enough about what is going on in the big picture to be like, something is going on here, something is going unmarked. That is really critical. To be able to evaluate sources is essential in today's day and age, to be like, I know how to understand, one, the limits of my knowledge, where I need to rely on specialists, but also like, where can I find reputable things? Where can I find trustworthy information? Does this pass a gut check? Those are all really critical skills. And then also, finally, just being really curious. That makes a big difference.
Cool. Yeah, no, and you thought of stuff that I hadn't, so that's always helpful. I think that there are several things that were really helpful for me. One of them is just learning how to be persistent, and being able to push for yourself and self-advocate. Even I hate self-advocating, I hate self-promotion, but I learned how to do it because I had to when I was working on my dissertation, and making sure, pushing for, I need to talk to you about this. I need to talk to you about this. What about this? Hey, this is a really important thing for me, and all those kinds of things is really important. Attention to detail is another big one that has helped in terms of just job stuff. They always say attention to detail, and that's something that you really do have to pay. That helps in so many different jobs in so many different ways, and not just in jobs but also in life. If you're reading through that lovely car lease contract, then what do you mean my interest rate is going to jump up 20% next year? Not that it would, but those kinds of things. So that kind of stuff is important. Let's see. Also, learning to talk to all kinds of different people without being afraid to do so, I think has been really helpful for me, so that if you need to talk to a president of something, or you need to talk to somebody who's a little, like a completely different stage, talking to all kinds of different people was a skill that I learned that I certainly didn't have before I went in there. So that's helpful. I'm trying to remember what you said and what I.
One of the things that we both, I just remembered after I said it, writing. That's right. Communicating clearly in the written word, absolutely essential.
yeah, writing, critical thinking, which is kind of attached to what some of the stuff that you were saying, be able to look at stuff and understand uh, what makes sense and what doesn't. All those different kinds of skills are definitely things that came out of the PhD. Um, and again, learning to appreciate people from different backgrounds and understand, and those interpersonal skills that you get when I certainly got from just the other people who were in the same situation, who are working on their master's theses or on their doctoral dissertations, or whatever it was at my university, and learning a little bit more about all those different things. That was really helpful in my career, not so much in getting the job that I have now, but in all the stuff that I've done since then, in terms of the music areas and everything. So I think that's it for now. If I think of more things, I will let people know.
Alrighty, well, thanks for those detailed answers. Now, this next question, I know we can go back and forth quite a while on because we did this in our pre-call, but what would you say are some particular challenges that you face being on this sort of independent scholar pathway? And then also we can end up with what are maybe some of the benefits of that as well. But let's start with what are some challenges that come up as an independent scholar?
No library.
No library.
No library. That is the worst. It sucks. It sucks so bad. I have access to local libraries. Ohio has Ohio Link. I can request theoretically any book in the state of Ohio and get it to my library. But one, it's going to check it out to me for 3 weeks, which is a stupidly short amount of time. And two, that doesn't help me know what's coming out. I can ask, I can request all sorts of things, but if I don't know about them, I can't ask for them. And not having access to a university library is one of the worst. And with that, the digital access, just Oxford Music Online, when you start a project and you're like, oh, I just want to see who the established scholars are. You go there, you look at the bibliography. That's a great starting place. Nope, you don't get that anymore. And it sucks.
Yeah, I miss having libraries. I have sometimes moved to places because I knew that there was a public university nearby. So like one of the reasons that we moved when I was back in Massachusetts, that we chose to move to Lowell versus to some of the other places, is because there was the University of Massachusetts Lowell, which is not a huge music powerhouse, but they had access to the entire UMass system, and I could just go there and use their stuff, just walk onto campus and do whatever I wanted to, and ask for different things, and look in all their resources, and it wasn't a university, but it was nice to have that. So yeah, no library, difficulty with resources and finding out what resources there are. Another issue that I've come across quite a bit, and it's gotten a lot better over the past 15, almost 20 years now that I've been an independent scholar. Okay, I feel so old now. But that inherent bias that a lot of people have, that people who are independent scholars or alt academics are not, they're second-rate researchers and writers, and that is absolutely not the case. And it's, as I said, it's gotten a lot better recently, so that people are much more accepting of, oh, you're an independent scholar, great, you still can write, you can still present, I love your stuff. So that's gotten a lot more comfortable in that situation. But I still get, especially from different publishers, things like, well, how are you going to, with the book that I'm writing now, how are you going to know whether it's appropriate for students or not? Or you don't really have the name association with the university, so it'll be harder for us to really push your book out. Or, those kinds of different things where, I know that there are a lot of other scholars who are out there who are better known than I am, but I don't have no name recognition. There are some people who know who I am. And so, I would hope that after a while, people would just accept me for what I have done. And some people are very good about that. And it's so much better than it was, as I said, like 15 years ago, even 10 years ago, even. But there's still that bias that you have to constantly push against to, again, kind of self promote and say, yes, I am, even if you don't necessarily believe it yourself, you have to at least tell people that, yes, you are a worthy person and a worthy scholar. Because trust me when I say there are so many people out there who think that they're not, that really you probably are, you just don't realize it.
To bounce off of that, not only other people thinking that about it, but I know for me, one of the things that was a real struggle was that even though the choices I made were in accordance with my deeply held beliefs and, made the most sense, it felt very much like I'd failed out of the field. And it felt like it was my fault that I was not good enough. And even if that guy could spend all the logic I wanted being like, well, look, even if I had a full-time academic position, I'm still not going to make as much as an engineer. Like, that's just not going to happen. That's not what's best for our family as a whole. Like, no amount of that reasoning really erased that, because it felt like I had failed out, even though it was my choice. And so to that, I say therapy. Find a really good therapist. That's good advice for everybody. My therapist wrote her dissertation on moms in academia, and I was like, wow, that's impossibly perfect. But realizing that, and kind of, this is going to kind of segue with one of the pros and one of the cons, is that making connections with people and feeling connected to the field, even if you don't have that built-in system of your department. It's not like you automatically have colleagues. You can't just sort of fall into that. But making those connections and having, friends and colleagues and all sorts of interpersonal relationships within the field, one, helps you stay more connected to everything. Two, is really good for the soul. And three, helps show that this is not somehow a personal failure. This is a structural systemic problem, and that's not our fault. I know, in addition to Lisa, so many brilliant people, just fabulously brilliant people that are not in the traditional tenure track position just because there aren't enough. And it has nothing to do with whether or not they're splendid and excellent and would be, a testament to anywhere they are. Is just a busted system. And talking to people instead of staying afraid and hiding that, being open and honest about that, was way more healing than trying to reason myself through it.
Yeah, well, and again, I think it's nice now that people are coming out and being proud of being independent scholars rather than being ashamed of it, because that is something that I know had been happening for a while, is that you see independent scholar on the list of papers or list of presenters, and for some people there's that automatic bias of, oh, this is not going to be as good. And you have to realize that that's not the case. With you as an individual, with anybody else who's out there, you have to take them, take what they have for what it is, rather than just making those assumptions that are out there. And that is another one of those cons.
One of the pros, now to get into a little bit of that part of Thomas's, is I have, though I do not have I miss my library, all that, I have a great deal of freedom in what I research, which is not nothing in today's day and age. I gave my presentation on Hades and sexuality and compulsory heterosexuality as a TAM lecture, a Thinking About Music series lecture at the University of Cincinnati, right after they had all the things about, the signs saying biological male, biological female bathrooms. And because I do not represent any university, I am not affiliated with any university, my bosses don't care what I write about. Like, one of them read it, and I was really impressed. She's like, I didn't understand everything you wrote, but I read it. And I was like, that was so nice. But I can write about what I actually think. And because I do not in any way reflect on a university, I have a great deal of freedom.
Yeah, same for me. And I've been saying that for years, because I know back when I was working on my dissertation, and um, part of it was the thinking at the time, and part of it was that certain schools have certain expectations, shall we say, that, the idea of writing a dissertation on cartoon music was just not even, what? There was not even a thought of that kind of thing happening at the time. And so now I can write on whatever cartoon music I want to. I can write, I'm including a chapter on LGBTQ in cartoon music. I'm including, all kinds of things about race and gender, because to me those are important topics and things that a lot of animation is really good at talking about, whether it's metaphorically or just blatantly, because or things like, the politics that are going on. I can write all about South Park stuff that's been going on for the past 6 months, and their representation of Trump, and how the music and other things that are there and all the sounds really work within that. And I mean, I might get in trouble the way that anybody would get in trouble in the United States these days, but there's not going to be any university who's going to question it. And it's also that I can go down any rabbit hole I want to.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm going down a rabbit hole right now on an Indian animation thing that's talking basically metaphorically about India versus Pakistan. And I know nothing about Indian animation, and I've learned so much. And I can, because I'm just like, ooh, this looks really cool. And it's about two different really bad musicians who make peace between two different groups. And I can just go down that rabbit hole as long as I want to, and nobody's going to yell at me.
Yeah, that aspect to follow your interests and not be on a timeline. I got so sick of jumping through hoops by the time I was done with the PhD. And so would I like to write more? Like, obviously, I'd like to have more time to do research. I think everybody I would also like more time to sleep. That's not happening either. But the things I've written are things that I'm very proud of. They're not things that I've rushed out. They're not things that I half-assed. They are things that I'm deeply proud of. Like my in writing about nostalgia and racism, and reflecting on growing up in rural Ohio. And I was writing and, finishing it up and doing a lot of the writing in like 2020, and reflecting on things that hadn't changed and things that had, and how relevant so many things still were. I'm deeply proud of writing that essay, and writing about realizing my own bisexuality as an adult, because I grew up in a rural area, and looking at, internet cultures and fandoms and receptions and how people interact on the internet. I'm really proud of that too. And I'm not publishing things on a crunch. I'm not publishing things with this eye of like, how's this going to look to a committee? I'm publishing things I'm proud of.
Yeah, you can publish. I mean, I still have deadlines on my books and things like that, or any journal
Oh
articles.
yeah,
There,
yeah, yeah.
those, yeah, but there's not that publish or perish kind of thing, and there's not the will it look good on my CV. It's, this is what I feel passionate about, and so I'm going to choose to write on it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're right. There are absolutely deadlines with the publishers, but it's not publish more things or lose your job.
Right.
All right, and I think on that note, we'll move into our last prepared question here, which is going off of that really in a lot of ways. What do you wish you had been told when you were in your PhD program or in your grad school? What do you wish you had been told by your professors or by your mentors when you were in most of our audience's shoes? So early career and graduate student, a lot of themes we've touched on, but like, what would have really helped you to have heard from someone, senior scholar or a mentor to you?
I'm going to go because I have so many thoughts. And Sarah, please feel free to interrupt, because I feel like this is something that we're going to bounce off of each other pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
So, things like um, that, write on what you want to for your dissertation, rather than what somebody tells you to. Especially these days, if people are saying, hey, you need to write on Mozart or Beethoven or one of the canon, no, you do not. You write on what you're passionate about. It'll show in your writing, and people will take more interest if you're doing that, and you will feel better about it, and you might finish it, whereas you might not finish the other stuff otherwise. That tenure track positions, while fantastic, are not the end all be all. That it's okay if if you need to get another job while you're writing or while you're in school, then that's okay, because I got some things about, oh, well, you just need to concentrate on finishing your dissertation and not working. That actually, I've seen that backfire for a lot of people, so that they finish their dissertation. They have never had any jobs outside of like work study, and then now they're out trying to find something that is not a tenure track position, and they have no resume that they can use to back themselves up. So for me, that was very helpful to have those different jobs. And it also gave me an opportunity to really see, again, other people's viewpoints and learn about things outside of the ivory tower. So I wish that people had told me that that was an acceptable thing, and maybe even something that would help me grow.
Mm-hmm. I'm
that,
gonna.
Go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I
I'm
was
gonna
kind of
pop in
paused.
here then. One of the things that I wish, especially because my grad work was at a conservatory, there's this attitude at conservatories and elsewhere that you pick a thing and you do that thing, right? You do that thing all the time. And I don't know if this was the hitherto undiagnosed ADHD or what, but I could never be just one thing. And in reality, getting to be all of me and not being limited to just one part of me, cranked up to 100. I wish somebody had been like, no, let's, continue to grow in all of these other things that interest you outside of your work. Because honestly, the layout stuff that I've been doing since I was like a kid and I just really like to do, that's one of my main jobs now, is doing graphic design. And with that, just because you didn't take a class on something or somehow a piece of paper saying that you know how to do that thing, the PhD should teach you how to learn things. Like, that is one of the things that we should learn as part of the process, is how to learn, how we learn. And so just being like, oh, yeah, I can learn that. And I don't need to discount my expertise just because I don't have a degree in graphic design. I can just do that. I can just do that. And that, that's just, those things are just huge. And I had another thought that just fell out of my head.
That's all right.
It's your turn, Lisa.
Okay.
Tagging you in.
So, and also just getting yourself out there, and, maybe some of the weirdly businessy things that one wouldn't expect, that you would need to know about, again, things like making a website. Hey, maybe you should make a website so that you can put your stuff out there. Maybe you go to, here are some different conferences that you could go to, some different ways to really connect and communicate. That maybe it was because, again, all of my professors were in that canon of, if it's later than 1950s, are we really interested in this? That kind of really old fashioned canon. So that push to learn more of the weird businessy things, or learn to, again, grow and know how to do different things that can really help, with not just getting a job, but also with your scholarship or other things, or with helping other people learn about stuff. If you're good at, say, not Excel sheets, but with databases, then you can use that kind of database stuff to really help you with your scholarship. And okay, let's see where all this different information is, and we can now put it all together, and then we can publish this database. And now look, people know you for that database. So all these different skills, as you were saying, that are not necessarily things that people think about, but that, hey, this will not just be something that is a side issue, but something that will help you with what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. And I remember the other thing I was going to say. I wish a professor had told me to think about what I actually want. instead of what I thought I was supposed to want. And I was very fortunate in that my advisor, Dr. Jong Won Jo, was very receptive to the idea of writing about Ludo for my dissertation. Like, she was great. But it's such a hard thing when it's like you go on this path, and you think you know what you want. The job that you end up with might not be something you can imagine. But stopping and thinking about what do I really want? What is really important to me sometimes gets lost in all the busyness. And I wish I had gotten to, I think it would have saved me some heartache with feeling like I'd failed out of the field, because in hindsight, one, I never thought I'd be so glad to not be, tied up with university funding and things, right, as I am right now. But in the other hand, I actually, I have a great deal of joy and happiness because the choices I've made are in accordance with my deeply held beliefs, with the things that I deeply value. And I get to have those. And I still get to make music, and I still get to do my work. And it's not the path that I thought I was going to go down. But I'm quite happy. As long as I don't think about outside. Outside's terrible. But if I think about what I actually get to do, those things are really matter. And one more thing. I just interrupted myself. Getting a job outside of academia does not mean your PhD was a waste. I wish somebody just said that flat out. Because like my dad was like, why did you do it? And I was like, Dad, I learned a lot of really useful things. It's not just for the job. So,
no, I mean, as I said, part of why my company hired me initially for something that was totally not related to what I was doing was because I had that PhD, and they knew that meant that I could think on my feet and that I could write, and I could in fact help the person who was the vice president who did not know how to write. I could clean up all of their letters and writing and everything. And so those skills really can help you as long as you realize that they are transferable, and as long as you're able to communicate to others that you have these skills, because it's not always, it's not one of those clear-cut things where you can put on your resume, hey, look, I have these classes, right? It's all these different skills that but you have to be able to explain it to others. And that's, if you're going to get a job outside of academia or outside of your area, you have to be able to sadly self-promote.
I just put practitioner of arcane technological wizardry as one of the things on my business card. Because honestly, that's the thing that I'm like, well, now I have job security. I'm the only one that knows how this old stuff is cobbled together to work. So
it's like somebody knowing COBOL in order to run NASA. Yes.
Yeah. Or, things that I worked at the VA for one summer, and it's like those old things. It's like, I know how to jerry rig computers. And that's probably the most useful thing I know, was because I was, if Kid Me had known how many things with buttons I would get to play with as a grown up, like, oh my gosh.
All right. Well, we'll keep this conversation energy going. I'm loving this, but we'll use the audience questions as a springboard. So, Hugo, would you like to unmute and answer your question? I'll put it up here for everyone to see.
Yeah, sure. I don't remember what was my question, honestly. Where can I? Okay, I can find it. Yeah, that was maybe a quite silly question, but I was thinking, what about researchers who work in the industry, like the industry that were, chasing? From my example is I'm studying in game studies, and I would love to work in the video game industry. And would that be considered art academic? And I mean, my question really is, how would I be looked at if I were to work in research and development, maybe knowledge management, and trying to get into research again? Because I come from France, and it can be a problem if you go to the industry and then go back to academia. Some people would not really like you coming back to academia. So from your experience, what would people think about it?
Well, Lisa, do you want to go first?
I was going to say, I think this might be a question to open up to other people who are on the call as well, because I think it really varies depending on your area. So I think that Ludo and film music, from what I've seen, they're much more open to having people from the industry come back into that because they have that experience and that firsthand knowledge that might be harder to get otherwise. So I've my experience just talking to people in, for example, in animation studies, which is what I know a little bit better, they are thrilled when people uh, from the actual industry come and come to the conferences and come and talk or do things of that nature because it's another approach and another way of thinking that they didn't have access to.
That all accords with what I've experienced in Ludo. There is, some growth and change, and I think there always will be. I think one of the things that would be particularly helpful is maybe to think less of what, I know this sounds terrible, what are they going to think of me? How are they going to prejudge me for that? Because there are going to be judgments related, whether you're an independent scholar, whether you're associated with industry, whether you're all those things. Instead of thinking of that, thinking of both, and that the skills that you bring to probably the writing and analysis skills that you're going to bring to game development, and then the access and inner workings knowledge that you would have to inform your research. And I think if you can articulate how, and look at the things that are very specific to your own experiences and articulate how those things intersect and how those inform each other, that will be really compelling.
All right, excellent. Okay, yeah, we have a bit of a rearrangement here. Rose, before you have to run, do you want to go ahead and ask your question live?
Yeah, it's okay if I'm just like off audio, but not off video. Oh,
Mhm.
sorry, I
Yep.
have audio on, but not video on. Okay, so I have thought about this kind of. I'll like do the longer version of the question, but not too much longer. I've thought about this a lot, like especially frustrations of now being on the job market for 3 years. Because even though I'm at Mississippi right now, it's a 1 year position, so I'm still on the job market. Um, but I wonder because of my particular research area and doing a lot of Japanese stuff and my ideal goal of wanting to do research in Japan, um, is this, is it just like impossible for someone like me who knows that I'm eventually going to have to do international travel as part of my research, or are there possibilities for, paths other than tenure track professor um, for someone who does the kind of research I do?
I think there are, Rose, and I can talk to you a little bit more about this outside of here if you have to run soon.
Yeah.
But I think one thing, you do so much stuff that's online. I think that a lot of stuff that would be more like journalism aspects, or the kind of almost, I mean, maybe even YouTube influence kind of stuff. You can do those kinds of things. There are some groups, I believe, that will give money to independent scholars. It's not enough. That's always the hard thing, is finding that line. I think that's one of the other things we didn't really mention, is that if you are an independent scholar, you have to, number one, be very passionate. Number two, really be able to carve out some time. And number three, have some type of personal funding, either through partners or through jobs that you have or what have you. That's can be really hard. But I think that for you, there are roles that you could do with, especially music journalism or anime journalism or those kinds of things, that would help you do what you want to do without necessarily that would be, I don't know if you call that alt academic because it's not associated with a university, but that have those same kinds of things that's a little bit um, less elitist than some academic ivory tower things can be, because you're very good at reaching out to a whole lot of different people. And I think that that kind of public musicology side of things with anime would really fit you well.
I'm going to
Okay.
back off what Lisa said in a little bit of a thing. One of the great things about not living in the ivory tower is realizing that there are many, many, many people, most people, I would probably say, who think a lot about music and they just don't necessarily have the language to articulate those thoughts in a way that we would immediately comprehend. And so to be able to be like, to communicate to people who are very clearly thinking hard about music, and if you listen to like Game of the Year podcasts and people are talking about their games of the year and the music, and it's like, these are not musicians, they're not using musicians language, but they have very deep observations. And so if you can communicate those things, if you can communicate to people and give them the language to articulate what they're hearing and to connect those things, that's so valuable. And the other thing is that, in my observation, everything is so unpredictable right now that, I mean, it always is, but especially right now, that trying to make plans based on what you think is going to be hireable is a perpetually moving target, right? And so what I'm seeing is that the relationship between academia and at its best, which is collaboration and curiosity and learning and experimentation, and the locations that we associate with it, the universities, that bond is weakening. And it's becoming really visible how weak that connection is, that academia is not coterminous. It does not reside within the building. It might reside within the library. That's the one exception. The library is it. But it's becoming more and more and more impossible to ignore that there are many wonderful parts of academia, some of the best parts of academia, that are happening outside of the university system, in the collaborations, in, Lisa and Dana's co-editing and things like that, where the really good stuff is happening. And universities are that disjunction between the industry and, all of that. That's very complicated. But, to say like, well, how am I going to find a job? The cracks in academia are very visible right now. And if you want to go to Japan, like get a job, like to say, be like, well, what's going to be hireable for academia? I don't think any of us know the answer to that.
Yeah. Well, and for going to Japan, if you spent, I don't think that in your case, if you spent, say, a year teaching English in Japan or something like that, and just in your free time doing everything you could Japanese, that you would have difficulty getting back into academia or into what you're doing, because that's another thing that can be very tricky. If you leave and you don't have those connections and you don't stick with learning about what you're doing, it can be very difficult to get back in.
Oh, yeah, Lisa, that's a great point. I know my youngest was born in 2020, about a month into the pandemic, which was a terrible time to have a baby. Don't do that. But feeling disconnected from the field, being intentional about maintaining connections, reconnecting, and that choice to reconnect and to have relationships with people. If you go for a year and you come back and you jump back into the swim of things, I don't think in Ludo anyone would look askance. We'd all be kind of jealous. Like, would I love to go travel more? Yes.
Yeah, but keeping those connections is super important, and making more of those connections as best you can, because it's that balance again between practicality of money and going to all the conferences you want to and the time and everything, and then doing everything. It can be tricky, but you do what you can, and then do as much about what you love versus what you feel is important to others, because if you do it with passion and what you care about, then people will see, and people are more likely to want to hire you because they're impressed by you, rather than, oh, look, you're writing on what everybody else is writing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I do want to keep moving through our questions, so thank you, Rose. And Adriano, would you like to ask yours next?
Yeah, so my question is mostly about time. One problem that I find in academia, especially as a PhD student, but I know later on, is that just like too muchness of academia. Like you spend so much time teaching and then you have to do all these research and you just don't have time for all of it. And then I see my partner who works an 8 to 5 and makes a lot more money than me and comes home and doesn't think about work. So I'm wondering like if taking this alt academic path actually like frees you up to do that thinking, and like how does the time compare? I know it's probably different having children and like needing to take care of them, but just yeah, what are your thoughts?
So I don't have kids. My husband was ABD, so he knows, and in music theory, so he knows music, and he is my partner in terms of helping me with all the fun stuff and all the analyzation and all those things that I'm like, what chord is this? Because he can hear it all. It's kind of scary. But it is very tricky. Even with an 8, I have an 8 to 5 job. And so I work from home, which is lovely. It's really nice to be able to work from home. It can be really tricky because it's doing that, but then all of your other errands that you normally would do, and then making sure you make your dinner, and all the other things that life just generally throws at you. So basically, what I end up doing is, or when it works best, is when I say, okay, I'm going to set aside a few hours, 4 days a week, like 1 or 2 hours 4 days a week, and those are my writing and research hours. And I stick to that, and I do that. And even if it's just kind of a little bit of, oh, look, I read half an article, that's progress. And that's the way that I have to think about it, is that can I do a little bit, 4 or 5 days a week? And if I can do a little bit, for those couple of days a week, then that's something. I'm able to do that. If I try to do another 40 hours or 20 hours or whatever on top of what I'm doing, my brain would go, or my husband would leave. So he wouldn't really leave. He would just not be very happy. But that's kind of the way that I, when I have big projects like that, I have to really approach it as a little bit at a time, and I just do those bite-sized pieces, and then I can do it. But to try and spend 20 hours a week, it's just not practical.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't, at my stage, so my schedule is very different from yours, Lisa, because mine is 3 jobs in a trench coat. And I will say that childcare is the biggest constraint. For me, it's not my work. My work is quite flexible. I mean, like, I've had to bring my kids to work, and I'm very grateful that I have that I can do that and still do my job. And Naomi's been to 1,000 staff meetings. But I also, about the time thing, I don't get to do as many hours of research as I might like. Some seasons of life, in that cliched phrase, have more and have less. But because my research is all stuff I feel very strongly about, all stuff I am fascinated with, my research kind of gets to be a little bit, not escapist, but like a little reward, right? Like, it's like a little reward. I get to, go read a book. I get to go do stuff. So when it is time for, when it's a little bit crunch time with like revisions and stuff, it's like, okay, we fed everybody dinner. I'm going to go lock myself in the office for 2 hours, and Ben's going to get the kids ready for bed because it's his turn. It's his shift. And now that they're both in school, I actually have more time than I've had to myself since grad school. And my bosses feel very strongly that since we all work on Sundays, we should have a Sabbath sometime else. So Wednesday is my Sabbath. And so Wednesday is a day I can read. Wednesday is a day I can write. And because there's no tenure clock, if I'm just bushed, then that's just how it is. I have to be realistic about the projects I take on. But every time I see people, everyone, every fall I get nostalgic and I'm like, oh, I miss being on a university. And then people start posting about grading and I'm like, I don't miss that at all. I don't miss grading at all. I'm actually really happy with what I'm doing. And I do have more wave. It's a treat instead of one more thing to do after all of the other work.
And to bounce off of that a little bit, I do find that I saw something. I was just very quickly looking at some of the chat stuff and talking about burning out. So that's one thing that has been very helpful for me, is that I use each job to kind of bounce. If I'm burnt out on one, then my brain starts to think about the other one. So if I'm getting frustrated with dealing with the learning management system at my work, then I may be doing stuff, typing in my very inane kind of things, but then thinking about, ooh, here's this other project that I'm working on. And then, okay, I'm really tired of thinking about South Park. I really don't want to think about South Park anymore. Then I can switch over to, okay, well, what is this other mental thing that I'm working on somewhere else? So it gives me an opportunity to kind of really switch. I mean, not just a little switch gears, but really switch gears if I'm getting really tired of one or the other.
Yeah. And then to back off what you're saying, we're going to just go back and forth. I guess it's tennis now. I'm not good at sports metaphors. I am very fortunate that I've never had to choose between working somewhere that I ethically disagree with and making a living. So the church I work for is a place that I feel good about bringing my kids to. It is a place I feel good, but they're also people who care about me as a person and not just as an employee. For example, there's been, a lot going on in our lives in the last couple of months. We lost an extended family member, traveling. My husband's have been under the weather. And one of my pastor bosses messaged me and he's like, hey, are you doing okay? Like, he's like, I'm not asking as your boss. I'm asking as your pastor, as your colleague, because I care about you. And so we got together and had lunch on Monday and talked about the world and I had a good cry. And so to be in a place with people that I can, I feel really glad that the place I am, that's better for my sanity and my burnout than academia was.
Yeah, and I think that that speaks to just wherever you happen to be, to find people that you're comfortable with. So like my boss, I keep telling him if he leaves the company, I'm following him, because he's not a musician by any stretch of the imagination, but he understands that there are things that are important to me, that if I that and conversations that I need to have, and he's just always good about listening to me and throwing a sympathetic ear out there. And the rest of my colleagues are the same. So if you can find that wherever it happens to be, whether it's in a music program, then that's just so important, I think, to just your well-being and your own mental health.
Yeah, find the people, and it's it doesn't all have to be at one job. Not I have talked about different things with different colleagues and different friends, but to find people that you can be all of yourself with in its many facets, and to get to be all of yourself instead of just one thing, and to get to really find the people with whom you can be, you're neither too much nor not enough. And that's regardless of what field you're in, regardless of where you are, finding people that you can have real connection with is honestly the only way to keep going some days.
Yeah. And also it, from a purely practical standpoint, it doesn't hurt in terms of, having those connections that you can reach out, not just to, cry with, or to, vent your frustrations, but also to ask for help, whether that's in, the academic world, like especially no library. Hey, can you get me a copy of this? Hey, do you know about this? That's how I learned about that wonky Indian film. Was I knew one person who knows Indian animation, and he reached out to the person who happened to be the director of the film, who then reached out to the person who happened to be the music director and composer for the film, and then got them in touch with me. And I'd never expected that, but it's just, I made those connections with people just because I thought that they were cool people and thought the stuff they were doing was interesting, and it happened to work out well in terms of that, the academic writing that I'm doing is in addition. So
yeah, the places we end up might not be the places we imagined, but they keep, they're often better when you're going on, prioritizing the things that are most important to you, of connection, of curiosity. Those are the best parts of academia. Those are the parts I like.
All right, that's wonderful to close out that question. So Jeremy, could we proceed on to your question if you'd like to unmute and ask it?
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, my question is, was a career in non-tenure track university teaching positions ever a consideration for either of you? I think we've sort of dipped into that a little bit here. But yeah, I would love to know, like, if that was a consideration of like, oh, this could be something I'm doing, for the foreseeable future. What made you decide against it and go into independent scholarship instead? And what do you think would be needed, like in someone's life circumstance, to make that a viable pathway for them?
so for me, a lot of it was just practicality. So Boston is a fantastic place. There are lots of universities, but there are also lots of graduates of said universities. So even the adjunct positions, you'll still get 100 people applying for an adjunct position. Um, but so that wasn't really my thought when I first got into that area. It was more, can I? My husband works in nonprofits, which is fabulous. He supports all kinds of wonderful things, but working in nonprofits is not something that was going to support the two of us. He was not going to be the sole breadwinner. So, I had to look at it and say, with the one adjunct position that I can get right now, will that be enough for us to live off of? And the answer was no. So it was either going to be, as some of my friends have had, 3, 4, 5 adjunct positions at once, which in Boston at that time was not going to happen. It's just too many people around who were trying to get those jobs. Or it was going to be doing something outside of academia. And so when the opportunity knocked and somebody said, here, have a job, which never happens, then I said, okay, it's a job, and it's gonna, it's not something that I'm going to be ashamed to talk about, because they were doing stuff to make sure that, again, people were safe. It was not something I was going to be ashamed about. It was going to help me pay the bills well enough so that I could do things like go to conferences, and, if I need to purchase books, then I purchase books. So that was kind of the trade-off, is, it was not going to, it was a practical thing. It was not going to be able to support me. I have had friends who their partners are the sole breadwinners, and they're able to do like the one adjunct position, or they are able to, again, cobble together 4 or 5 different positions and then eventually get that tenure track job. And to those people, I'm just like, wow, I can't believe you can do that. That's really impressive, because I don't know that I could do 4 or 5 different adjunct positions without going crazy.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
I
It
don't
does.
know if
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Go ahead, Sarah.
So for my experience, I had put out some feelers, kind of just like, I know people on faculty at Ohio's tons of little universities. And so I had been like, hey, if you ever need, a musicologist to teach a one-off class, hit me up. And one, they never did. But 2, reflecting on it, especially with the lack of childcare that I had, it would have been, do I want to teach an adjunct job and drive all over God's green earth Or do I want to use that time for research? I get so little time to be that side of myself. And on the whole, I would rather use that for the things that are interesting to me. And so at this point, if one of my friends, who knows people was like, oh my gosh, we need somebody to teach a Ludo class, like, I'd be like, okay, I would do it for you. I would take on that adjunct position. But honestly, the workload of teaching and the way things are, like, really my time choice came down to, do I spend that time on teaching, or do I want to spend that time on research?
Or do you want to spend that time on teaching or with family?
Oh yeah, because mine wouldn't have been the or family, because I'm the default parent. So mine would have been, do I want teaching or research? Because these are all the hours I get, because my husband works a standard job and travels quite regularly. And so our schedule has to be that if he's gone, I can fly solo. And sometimes that's been easier. Sometimes that's been harder. Every once in a while, we've had to tag in, folks, because it's like, oh, the kids have 2 different activities in opposite directions. But for me, as the default parent, my choice was research or teaching.
All right. Well, thank you for answering that. And it looks like we have a couple of questions submitted anonymously. I'm going to assume that means I should read them out, although if someone would rather unmute and ask, feel free to interrupt me. So we have this first one. What are some of the types of careers that are common paths for music academics who go elsewhere? Where should one start looking, and how to sell ourselves? How should we sell ourselves? I'm just unsure of where to start looking, especially for those of us with less strong performance backgrounds. Undergrad was in composition.
Sure. So one of the things that I've seen a lot of people go into is music librarianship. The difficulty is then usually you have to get an MLA or a degree in music librarianship. So that means even more studies and sometimes even more debt. But that is an area that I've seen a lot of people go into. I think a strong one for a lot of people is music journalism or Ludo journalism, or some type of journalism side of things. And that can be started with just working on blogs, or working on TikTok videos, or working on your YouTube stuff. That is a job. Don't let anybody tell you that it is not, because the people that I know who succeed in that put a lot of time and effort into it, and have to do you have to put money into it in terms of your technology. You have to really sell yourself as, look at how knowledgeable I am, look at all these cool things, and then build up a base if you're doing it that way. Ryan might be able to talk a little bit about it too, because I know that Ryan, sorry, I'm going to throw people on who really were not invited to this, but things like some of the different online publications where you start basically you write lots of comments on there, and then they say, hey, you're really interesting, would you like to write for us? Or you submit articles for some of those different online publications, and then you can get started that way. I'm trying to think if there are other big career paths. Some people I know end up doing, if you know more about orchestral music or about band music or about other musics, people will write program notes and start to get into stuff that way, and writing program notes. And then again, you get to be a little bit better known, and people can contact you for lectures or other stuff. But those are some of the things that I've heard. Sarah, do you want to add, or anybody else in the audience? Sorry to take over, Thomas, but anybody in the audience who has suggestions, I think, put it in the chat, because I certainly don't know everything.
I'm going to come from the opposite angle of things. So instead of thinking, what jobs are commonly available, what are your particular skills? What are the things that come naturally to you? What are the things that you just kind of flow with your nature? For example, I am really good at details. I am really good at citations. And so I ended up setting up an LLC that I do editing work. A lot of it was like DMA students doing proposals, needing their proposals reviewed and help editing. And it was one of these things where I could help with the revision process. I knew what, the thesis committee needed. I knew those sorts of things, but I'm very good at just just the way my brain works. You want footnotes? I can footnote the crap out of everything. And so what are the skills that come naturally to you? And then, how can you put those to use? A lot of it is, if I sound like a broken record, making connections with people, but then also demonstrating being super reliable. So I only have a bachelor's in voice and piano. Like, I don't have a graduate degree in performance. But I've worked with musicians in this area for like a decade now. My oldest doesn't remember not knowing them. And they're tied into so many other things. And so when they need somebody, they're going to call me because I'm extremely reliable. I'm going to show up. I'm going to do a good job. And then that also puts me in touch with other people in other arts organizations. I'm looking at what Thomas is saying. Yeah, arts organizations. There's choral societies around here. It is difficult to say, here is a category, here is a search term. But if you think about what skills you have and then making connections within the music community and within the broader arts community, that can often be like, oh, my skill set would fit really well here.
Well, that's true. And there are a lot of people who are in this field who are also really good with technology. And I've been seeing some of that stuff pop up. And so, if you're good at technology, to bounce off of that, then, there are all kinds of different things that you can do. And then, you can bring music into it. Possibly you could do music on the side. It's really, I never thought I was going to be in the biotech industry. Never, ever, ever. So it really, there are a lot of avenues that are, as you were saying, that a lot of people take, but that doesn't mean it's the only thing to do. Just to piggyback again off of what you were saying.
Alrighty. Okay, we'll wrap that question. And then the last one we have in the queue, although feel free to add in like another one to finish off if someone has a burning question on their mind. We have, how does one sell their skills as a humanities PhD, like writing and research, to a non-academic job? I was thinking about this one a lot, Lisa, when you were talking about your story and the person saying, well, you have a PhD, so can you do this job? So maybe talk a little bit about how we narrativize our skills and their applicability outside of academia.
Well, so again, I think some of the stuff that Sarah and I were talking about at the beginning of what kinds of things did we learn from grad school? If you're going for a job that requires a standard resume, my resume has a top section, which is, describing myself in a sentence or two, and then putting all of my skills in there. And I put skills in there that are not listed in all of my jobs. So, that I'm a good writer, that I have, good project management skills, that, all those kinds of things. And I plop them in there, so that AI can find those lovely word searches and just grab some of the words of different things that are strengths of yours. So that's one thing to do if you're just trying to go out there and find any job using LinkedIn or using, Indeed or any of those kinds of things. So that's one thing to do. Another thing, that I like to do is practice interviews with people in different areas, wherever those happen to be. I mean, my poor husband has had to be my practice interviewer on so many times, it's not even funny, so that, I can practice talking about the different things that I would bring to a particular position or the different areas, so just kind of getting those thoughts in your mind and knowing what you're, and being honest with yourself. What am I good at? What kinds of things can I really talk to? And can I talk to them and communicate them clearly? So those are a few of the skills I think that would be helpful, or a few of the ways to really get yourself out there. Another one is going to conferences and just, again, meeting people, talking to people about different things. so that, and those might end up with jobs outside of academia as well. You go to a conference and you're talking with somebody about some of your interests, and it goes off into these weird conversations about, oh yeah, well I was learning all about I was having to put together the database again, for all these different things. And then they come back to you later and say, hey, I heard that somebody was looking for somebody to help with database. Do you mind? And then it goes from there. So those connections that Sarah and I have been talking about, and the importance of those, and getting to know people on a little bit more than a surface level than you might otherwise do, can be really helpful, and can weirdly help you with showing off your skills, even if you're not meaning to.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it, I think. And along with that, I think that the idea that if you've learned, all those things that you learned along the way are important to keep those skills. I worked a bunch of random jobs in the summers at grad school, and those were skills that I developed, and those were things that I used. And some of the stuff that comes back, the reason I do anything with websites is because a professor was like, can you update my website? And I was like, yeah, probably. And, and then just developing that skill. And now that's one of the things I do on a regular basis. It's one of the things I do for NACFGM. And being willing to not necessarily toot your own horn, which I'm not particularly good at, despite being very loud. But just start doing things, like there have been times where it's like, I always end up being tech support anywhere I go. That's just the way I am. I'm like, oh, do you need help with this thing? But by doing it, that is one proof of your skills. And two, being helpful is nice, but like, that's the way. And then I think of NACFGM this past year when there were computer difficulties, because case technology didn't do its job. And it was one of those things. I wasn't officially in charge of anything, but things needed fixed and I had the tools to help. And that resulted now that's one of my jobs. And involved with that is the database building that I learned because I did this other random job. So all of those skills that you pick up along the way are not necessarily incidental. Those are the things that coordinated with the skills you develop in grad school that help you find where to be. All the stuff I picked up along the way is actually more of what I do with my day-to-day job than the stuff the skills, the techniques, the technical things. Nobody's asked me to analyze a fugue at literally any point in my job. I did do a quick set theory analysis of Taverner's the Lamb because it was one of our previous director's favorites. And I was like, can I teach it to the choir? The directors were like, you can send an email. And I did, and at least one person read it, which was very nice of them. But those things that I picked up along the way, and I was like, oh yeah, I can help with that. Oh yeah, I can do that. Oh, like the person who used to do the tech at the church took another job, and they were kind of in a bind. And I was like, oh, actually, I have those skills. I can do that. And it just kind of turns into a thing.
Well, and that speaks to something that you were talking about before, which is, learning that curiosity and learning new things, and not necessarily learning things because you think those are going to be popular skills, but because you find them interesting. And there's enough variety in what the world has to offer so that those skills will be useful somewhere.
And then to cap that off with one of the things that's very hard for me, and I don't know if it's hard for everybody, but it's very easy to undersell my skills because I just did it for fun. It's like, oh, I just wanted, one day I was like having a day and I'm like, I'm going to develop a font. And so I taught myself to make a font, and it's based on the Wiesbaden Codex of Hildegard von Bingen, and you can type in it. It's an OTF file. And it's like, oh yeah, Marcus, you can just install it as an OTF file on your computer. It's not her, it's one of her scribes. But that was just a thing I did because I wanted to. And that was my little treat for getting the stuff I had to do done. And it's very easy to be like, oh, well, it's not a big deal. It's just a thing I did. If I did it, it must not have been that hard. But those skills that we pick up and that you learn because you're curious are probably less common than you think, or at least they are for me.
And that speaks to something else, which is reminding yourself that the way that you think is not the way that everybody else thinks. That was one of the hardest things that I learned in grad school. And that was, from being a tuba player, I have a master's in tuba. And, that meant that the way that I listened to music was very different from the way that everybody else did, because I was listening to it from that bass harmony perspective of, okay, so this goes to this and this goes to that, and I just thought everybody thought like that, and they do not. And it did not occur to me that people did not think the same way that I did, and that's happened throughout my life. And I have to learn that not everybody thinks the way that I do and works the way that I do, and that can be frustrating and difficult and annoying, but it can also be fabulous and inspiring. And to share those different approaches and different ideas with the world, and everybody's different thoughts they can share with you, and the other direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Alrighty, and I think with that we have fully filled up the hour and a half. So thank you everyone for your excellent questions and for coming to be a part of this Level Up Together seminar. Let's give another Zoom hand for Sarah and for Lisa for their excellent insights and experience.
Applause for Lisa. And
Applause
thank you,
for
Thomas,
Sarah.
for being such an excellent moderator and host.
Yes, and thank you for inviting us.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, thank you. It was really excellent to hear from you both. And so just for a little sneak peek about what is to come, I do have we have 3 more Level Up Together webinars in this season, which is this academic year, and those will happen in February, in March, and April. Keep an eye out in the Discord for the exact dates to come, as well as the guests. I have 2 of the 3 guests nailed down, and I'm just trying to get the 3rd slotted in. But the topics will be on academic editing and writing and publishing. It will be February. It'll be on Ludomusicology archives and research resources in March. And then in April, it will be developing, so this will be more on the academic side, I suppose, the developing the tenure track portfolio of research service and teaching with an eye towards Ludomusicology. So those will be our 3 Level Up webinars for the semester to come. So everyone, thank you for joining today, and keep an eye out for those announcements. And let's give one more hand for Sarah and Lisa for today's webinar.